They need to abide by the rules, and we should be prepared to take whatever steps are necessary to enforce those rules.
If they will not allow American inspectors to participate,
We should take whatever steps are necessary to enforce the rules.
including military.
Absolutely.
Senator Lott.
I certainly agree with that, and I think it's important to note that all of our UN allies agree with that, including Russia and China. They have been calling on Saddam Hussein to allow these inspectors to stay. I suspect that the reason they're trying to block them is that they were very close to finding some more very dangerous weapons, and I think we need to take whatever actions are necessary, and we expect consultation from the administration with the Congress in that regard, but I suspect that something will have to be done relatively soon.
Congressman Gephardt.
I obviously agree with it. I think President Clinton has been clear with Saddam Hussein. I think he will continue to be. The only thing he seems to understand is action, and that's what's going to happen.
Senator Daschle.
Obviously, there's bipartisan support. The actions taken by Saddam Hussein are completely unacceptable, and I think we have to act sooner rather than later.
And that would include military action?
Absolutely.
All right, let's turn to campaign finance. The hearings conducted by Senator Fred Thompson and John Glenn are over, Senator Lott. What happened?
Well, I met with Chairman Thompson and other members of the committee last week. We talked about it. I've also discussed it with Senator Daschle. Basically, I agreed with the approach that Senator Thompson outlined in his press conference on Friday, in which he said that they were going to not have any more hearings unless more information was forthcoming or unless something new needed to be pursued. You know, once before, they were beginning to phase down their hearings, and then the videotapes came out, and more tapes came out this last week. So it's possible that the committee would have to resume hearings at some future point. They'll have to write a report. That will take some time, but barring some dramatic development, which could happen, I suspect that they will not be extended beyond the end of the year. But I told the chairman, depending on what happened, I would support him if an extension was necessary.
Senator Daschle, were the hearings worthwhile?
Tim, I don't think that they were conducted in the way that we would have done so had we been in the majority. They weren't as bipartisan as they need to have been. They weren't as thorough. Obviously, when you look at the numbers of subpoenas issued by Republicans versus Democrats, it was about 10 to 1. The number of days dedicated to Republican allegations versus Democratic, it was about 10 to 1. But we said, as Senator Lott has indicated, that we would end these hearings at the end of the year. I think that was the appropriate thing to do. Now we've got to move on to pass meaningful campaign finance reform. That's got to be done in the next session, and this sets the stage for that to happen.
Senator Lott, were the hearings worthwhile?
I think they were. I think a lot of things that needed to be pursued would not have been if it had not been for this. I think, for instance, the Justice Department wouldn't have known some of the things they now know. I don't think that they would be pursuing 3 separate independent counsels that's in the process now. I think one of the most interesting and perhaps dangerous things from the standpoint of what might come next were the hearings this past week with Secretary Babbitt. I think that that is as close as we have seen an instance where there appears to have been the possibility of action and money being connected. Yeah, I think they were worthwhile, but I don't see any need, as the senator said, in just having hearings to have hearings. If you have witnesses that have something to offer, call them. I think it's very unfortunate we never could get at the foreign money contributions. The number of people who said they would not testify, including Johnny Chong and Wong and others, they just basically said, we're not going to tell what happened on foreign contributions. And I do think that's one thing that we could do on campaign finance reform. I do think we need to tighten up the foreign contribution area of how it's disclosed, and limits on how it can be given. I think also we need some additional limits to say specifically that fundraising by phone calls or otherwise cannot occur at the White House or the Executive Office building. I think we should raise the limits, and I think certainly we should allow labor union members to be able to say how their union dues are used. Now they cannot do that, and over 80% of the American people, 70% of union members, think their dues should not be taken and used for political purposes without their permission.
Would you be open to allow corporate shareholders to have the same right?
We're willing to look at that. I think it'll be more difficult to do that because they are voluntary stockholders, whereas a union member quite often is, you know, a requirement to have a job. You have to belong to the due or pay the dues.
Now, on the Senate side, you've scheduled a debate for March 6th.
Well, no, by March 6th. It could come up earlier. I think we both need time to assess, or all of us need to have time to assess, can we come to some sort of an agreement on what a base package might be? And we reserve that right. We didn't say what the base bill would be. You know, if we really wanted to do something, we'd quit trying to trump each side and say, what is it we can agree on? Now, we might not could agree on something the New York Times would say was good, but, you know, could Tom Daschle and Trent Lott agree on something that would help campaign finance reform. I think we ought to pursue that.
Could you, Senator?
Well, I think we could. I think we'd have to go back to this required union allocation of resources back to members and look at other organizations as well. Your question about corporations was was on point, Tim. I think we also have to look at other organizations that mandatorily dedicate a significant portion of membership dues to political activity. So, but I do think that there is the possibility that we could meld a good campaign finance reform bill, and I think we've got to make the maximum effort to get the job done. We haven't had this good an opportunity in years, if not decades, and I think this is the time to do it. Let's do it next year.
Let me just say one thing, if I could, before we go on to others, before we get more serious subjects. You know, there's only one show in Washington that's running as long almost as Meet the Press, and that's Strom Thurmond, so don't get complacent. He may outlive you and outshow you yet.
I defer to Senator Strawman on this and most things. Speaker Newt Gingrich, on the House side, will there be a debate on campaign finance and a vote certain?
Well, let me back up for 1 second just to say we have approached the investigations very differently in the Senate. Our focus is on illegality. We're looking at illegality with the Teamsters and Citizens Action and the Democratic National Committee under Chairman Pete Hoekstra. We're looking at illegality in foreign contributions with Chairman Dan Burton. We're looking at illegality in non-citizens voting in California and other places under Chairman Bill Thomas. We're looking at illegality in the way the Immigration Naturalization Service has been misused. We're going to be looking, I think, at the Babbitt question and whether or not the Secretary of the Interior connected $500,000 in contributions to a decision about Indian casinos. So the investigation side in the House is going to be going on, but its focus is really oversight. Were illegal actions underway? And it should trouble Americans that over 60 people have now either fled the country or taken the Fifth Amendment. I mean, that there's a very significant body of evidence out there that's being covered up and hidden by people who are refusing to cooperate with investigations. I think we will have, and we'll be talking with Dick Gephardt about it, but we will have a vote either in March or April, is my guess, on campaign finance reform. There's some thought of letting the Senate go first since they started, and then seeing how the Senate works out, but setting a date certain in either March or April for us to also work on a campaign finance bill. But I just want to say, I'm amazed in this city. The reforms of the 1970s, the idea that you'd have presidential taxpayer finance campaigns, the idea that there'd be spending limits, the idea that you'd sign a note pledging not to do things, that's all been washed away. I mean, if you look at the evidence from last year, between Steve Forbes buying an amount of money in primaries that nobody could match, and the president cheerfully going out and raising millions of dollars outside the system, nobody's talking about how do you redesign the presidential campaign side. I mean, the taxpayers put up the money in order to get a limited campaign, which is clearly now unlimited, and there's not a consultant in America in either party who's going to recommend that you not do something in the year 2000 that's outside the current rules. And I just think we have to look not just at adding new things or shaping new things, but what lessons are we learning out of all this to get us to redesign the campaign act that affects presidential campaigns? And then what lessons should we all learn from the fact that Al Checky is now saying in California he's going to write a $55 million personal check
To run for governor.
To run for governor in a state where Dan Lundgren, who's middle class, has to raise money in $500 limits. And what do we do when you have millionaires? You're going to have Ross Perot on in a few minutes, a man who basically has bought a place at the table in American politics. And what do you do in a country where there are people rich enough that they can personally spend out of the interest on their income more than either political party spends in a year?
But the Supreme Court has upheld that.
So my point is, as a rational country, don't we need some rule that says there should be no campaign contribution limit to a person whose opponent spends over $100,000? Shouldn't there be some countervailing ability for middle-class people to raise money?
So
when their opponents
unlimited campaign contributions?
I'm just raising the question. You may want to ask Ross Perot. What should the ground rules be if he won't pledge to stick to $1,000? How can you have millionaires attempting to buy the presidency or attempting to buy a governorship, attempting to buy a Senate seat or a House seat, and not do anything to change the game so middle-class people, and I think all four of us, interestingly, are middle-class. None of us come out of personal wealth.
Dick Gephardt, you just heard Speaker Gingrich say there'll be a vote certain March, April. What kind of bill do you think you can compromise or fashion with the Speaker?
Well, first, I'm positive on getting the vote. We've got 180 Democrats who signed a discharge petition to get a rule out that would bring up all the campaign reform bills for a vote, and I hope that will be the kind of process we have where everything can be voted on, we can have a full debate. But let me say first on the investigations, I think the American people are getting fed up with spending millions and millions of their dollars investigating and reinvestigating the same material over and over again. Surely we can have one investigation. The Senate's done it, the Senate's finished. We ought to move on to campaign reform, which is the real issue that people want us to act on, and we should act on. I think we can get campaign reform done. The Speaker said we need more money in campaigns. We need to take the limits off. I don't agree with that, but maybe we can find a compromise. I put out a constitutional amendment which addresses directly this question of what anybody can spend in a campaign pumping for a candidate or against a candidate. I think we got to look at that. I think we got to look at getting rid of soft money or limiting soft money. I think we got to look at limits. We got to look at everything that's out there. The people of this country are fed up with the political system and the way it works. Probably the most important task we have in this Congress is to get good campaign reform done. This Congress signed by the President.
Tim, I mean, this show shows you what the problem is. We've spent half of the show now talking about this issue, and yet when you talk to the American people, this is not a subject they raise. What they want to talk about is crime in their neighborhoods, juvenile crime that's gotten to be a real problem in this country. How do we improve education at the local level for K through 12? What can we do about a fair tax code and getting some tax relief for the workers of this country? That's what they want to hear us talking about. And here we are talking about campaign finance reform.
Let me just say one thing about that. You're right. When I go out door to door or go to a town hall meeting in my district, people don't readily bring up campaign reform. Let me tell you what's happening. People are cynical about this system. People are dropping out, not voting. They hate the system. They think that money has corrupted the system, and they want us to act. And I think we've got to act for the good of the country.
Do you believe that soft money, Senator Lott, should be eliminated, so-called corporate contributions? President Clinton spent $30 million in soft money on TV commercials. Bob Dole spent $9 million on TV commercials. Shouldn't it be eliminated?
Unless we can deal with both sides of the equation, which in my opinion means dealing with the unfairness of the labor union dues being allowed for members to say how that's spent. You can't limit it on one side without having some restraint on the other side. It has to be fair, and that's what I mean talking about, oh, we're going to just do this side or that side. There's some things we can agree on, and that's limiting foreign contributions. That's allowing individuals to contribute more. That's getting some limits on people using federal facilities. There's some things we can agree on.
Tim, there's two things we've got to do. We've got to eliminate soft money. We've got to eliminate this concept now of issue advertising in the name of candidate advocacy. That's going on in the gubernatorial races right now. It's going on in congressional races. And bottom line is we've got ways that we didn't have before of circumventing the law. And as we circumvent the law with more and more money, the whole system, as Speaker Gingrich has noted, and as Dick has indicated, is completely out of whack. We don't have laws anymore. It's a free-for-all.
How do you limit people's ability to speak about an issue or a candidate?
If money is speech, only the wealthy are going to have a voice.
Speaker Gingrich, you have an open seat in the Staten Island, Susan Molinari's seat. The Republican National Committee dumped in $800,000 in television ads with corporate soft money.
And it was all totally legal. But here's, there are two things here. What the Teamsters did last year, what Citizen Action did last year was illegal. What John Huang did in raising foreign money was illegal. So the House is focusing on what's illegal. The people who are not American citizens who voted in California are illegal. You're not allowed to vote if you're not an American citizen. So let's start with illegality. Our investigations are about things that are illegal, and I frankly don't agree with Dick Gephardt's assessment. I think the American people do want to know when the law is broken, and they do think it's important to get to the bottom of this, despite stonewalling and obstructing and refusing to testify. So we do have an obligation. Second, you know, the first ads that were run in 1995 were run by the unions. They're run with coerced money, and we know from Washington State, where they passed an initiative, that when union members are given the right to decide whether or not to turn the money over, they won't do it. They have one union local out there which went from 2,500 contributors to 85 contributors once they had the right to decide whether or not to sign the check. Now, we know that for example, when Jim Bunning voted for fast track in the Ways and Means Committee, there were immediately ads put up in Cincinnati by the unions. So I just think you ought to have a balanced perspective. Union soft money is fully as dangerous as corporate soft money and is more coercive.
Will there be campaign finance reform by early next year?
Well, I've said I think we should have a vote. We want to talk it out, and I think the Senate may go first, but I would think in March or April we want to have a vote in the House and hopefully be able to go to conference.
And achieve something.
I think there are clearly things from instant disclosure to paycheck protection for union members, to looking at making sure American citizens vote. Steve Horn has a bill that says you have to be an American citizen to vote, and the registrar can verify it. I mean, there are a number of things like that that I think absolutely we should sign into law next year.
You mentioned fast-track trade legislation, and let me turn to that now. You have scheduled a vote Friday in the House of Representatives. Do you have the votes to give the president fast-track trade
One of the two
negotiations?
people here will be victorious on Friday, and it tells you how close the House vote is, that it is literally this close. I think we will probably have 2 out of every 3 Republicans vote yes. If the president can't get about 70 Democrats, I think it's going to be very, very hard. He had 95 vote with us on NAFTA. If he can't get to about 70, I think, frankly, it's going to go down. If the vote were held tomorrow morning, fast track would clearly lose. We have a week to make our case. We believe it's important in Latin America for the first time since before World War II. Europeans are outselling the United States in the southern part of Latin America. There are serious reasons we need to be able to trade in those markets, and if we don't pass fast track, we're going to kill some American jobs. But Dick Gephardt makes a powerful case on the other side, and I think the unions have been very effective. And I'm not at all certain today that the president can get 70 Democrats to vote with him.
Congressman Gephardt, can the president get 70 Democratic votes over your opposition?
Let me first say that the president and I really agree on what we're trying to do here. It's the disagreement with the Republicans that makes this hard. We're looking for a modern trade policy, a new trade policy that emphasizes labor, drug interdiction, and environmental concerns, along with intellectual property and capital, which the Republicans have always rightly insisted on.
But the president's aligned himself with Speaker Gingrich on this vote.
He's had to because they have a majority of the Congress.
All right,
the president
but will 70 Democrats join with Speaker Gingrich, or do you have the vote?
I don't know the answer to that, but let me say this. We demean this debate if we just say, oh, it's the unions putting on pressure, or it's the corporations putting pressure. This is a serious issue. This is an issue about the trade architecture of the world in the next 50 years. And what I'm arguing for is giving labor, human rights, drug interdiction, environmental concerns as much standing in trade treaties as we now give intellectual property and capital. I think it only makes sense.
Let me say one quick thing. First of all, obviously, since the president and I are both trying to get yes votes and Dick is trying to get no votes, we're not exactly, I mean, I don't think he and the president are on the same side in this. But more deeply, looking at what happened in the money markets in Asia in the last 2 weeks and the effect they had here, I believe if the U.S. Congress votes down next Friday fast-track protection, we send a signal to the world that is devastating. I think that the world is looking for us to take leadership in reaching out, and I think in Latin America, if we defeat fast-track, the Europeans are going to gain an enormous advantage over the United States. And I agree with Dick. This is a serious debate. It's not just personality.
Well, I
It's a
certainly
serious
agree
difference.
with the speaker on that. I think this is a very serious matter, and I think it'll have very negative ramifications if we don't follow through and allow for, trade agreements, fair trade agreements to be entered into. The president has been off to, in my opinion, a slow start on fast track. He has a lot of work to do. He's got opposition within his own party, but I believe in the Senate that we have more than the necessary 60 votes to cut off a filibuster. Even with that, though, it takes a lot of time in the Senate to force the votes through to a final conclusion. That will be our problem in the Senate. Can we get it done here in the next week? We're going to need a lot of help from the president and from Senator Daschle to make that happen.
Senator Daschle, will Democrats in the Senate support the president on fast track?
Well, Tim, I think that what Democrats want is what Dick has said. Democrats want to make sure that we've got the kind of free trade arrangement, recognizing the world markets, but we also recognize that the world is changing, and we've got to demand of other governments and other corporations outside our borders fairness in employment, fairness in the environment, fairness in agriculture, fairness in trade policy. That's really what we're trying to articulate here. How can we achieve both fairness and making sure that there is sort of an equilibrium, a balance between our demands economically and all the requirements that are put on our companies and our employees and our workers?
Will you vote yes or no with the president?
Well, I'm negotiating with the White House right now. Sometime in the next couple of days, we're going to be in a position to announce our decision. But at the same time, we're trying to put as much into the trade agreement and to accompanying documents as we possibly can to ensure that the things that Dick has articulated are realized in this agreement.
What are you negotiating on? Maybe I better get into that.
Gentlemen, we have to leave it at this. We thank you all very much for joining us on this 50th anniversary. One last question. Anyone at this table who has not thought about running for president, raise their hand.
Who has not thought about running for president? I've not thought about it.
Just one. Daschle's the only hand up. Gingrich,
Is it a very honest morning?
It is a very honest morning. Gingrich, Gebhardt.
Only because my mother,
back in '98.
There we go.
only because my mother and my wife said, don't do it.
That's all right. Senator Lott, Senator Daschle, Congressman Gebhardt, Speaker Gingrich, thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you all back here real soon. Coming next, the one and only Ross Perot. Then Bob Dole talks about presidential politics, past and future.
Meet the Press is sponsored by Bayer Corporation, a research-based company in healthcare, chemicals, and imaging technologies.
Most people know us as the inventors of a wonder drug, but we also help make fabrics stronger, homes more energy efficient, animals healthier, and we're helping to lead the way in biotech research.
So much good we can do for each other. Oh, what a world it can be.
Bayer. In healthcare, chemicals, and imaging technologies, we cure more headaches than you think.
Here comes the airplane. He's coming into land and there's an open hangar. Oh, no. Look at the big airplane.
How long have you disliked airline food?
Open, open, open. No, not open.
Perhaps you've known since you were a child.
Oh, yes. What a good baby you are.
That's why United has hired Chef Sheila Lukens of the Silver Palette Cookbook to create our meals. And Coach, of all places.
So? You have to let more folks know about us.
Dad, we need a new location.
Every band has a place.
Now check this out.
Dad.
There's a space.
See? This is our new location.
This is the internet.
Whoa.
475 people visited our gallery on our website last night.
I told you, location is everything.
Experience the art of doing business on the internet with the most powerful network in the world.
They are our mothers and daughters, sisters and wives. They are our friends and partners. But 1 out of every 9 will be stricken with breast cancer. That's why GE created its Senograph technology. It helps doctors detect tumors earlier, so a remarkable 91% cure rate is possible. So that all our grandmothers and granddaughters, best friends and good neighbors, may live happier, healthier, and longer lives.
When Wall Street served up its stock du jour, the manager of Steinrow Growth and Income Fund dined elsewhere. He looked for the undervalued, the unfairly maligned, and whatever it took to find them, he did. Who knew to go with him? Over half are customers of Mutual Fund OneSource from Schwab, where over 600 no-load funds are all in one place, along with the tools to choose them. Call now and get our select list free. Investing the way it should be.
And we're back with the founder of the Reform Party, Ross Perot. Mr. Perot, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
All right. You suggested last night that you were deeply disappointed that Senator Fred Thompson had suspended his Senate hearings looking into campaign fundraising abuses. What are you going to do about it?
The reason they were suspended is both sides were guilty. They had a gun pointed to one another's head, and they said, well, let's just drop it. These people are guilty of criminal acts involving tens of millions of dollars. A few years ago, we had a much higher standard. Let's go back to places, well, the money Spiro Agnew took is nothing. The money Jim Wright got is nothing. Spiro Agnew had to leave the vice presidency. Jim Wright had to leave the House. Wilbur Mills' big problem was his girlfriend went swimming in the tidal basin. He had to leave in disgrace. And Watergate, let's compare Watergate to this. Watergate was a break-in. This involves tens of millions of dollars of illegal money. This involves foreign money. This involves things that the American people just won't tolerate. The government's not going to touch it. All this smooth talk won't get any action. But you stay tuned. Next Wednesday, we're going to take it head on, and we're going to force the issues out on the table. You just take the tapes and all these things that exist now. Any ordinary person would go to jail with that much evidence, but not in Washington, because the people who are supposed to work for us are bulletproof. And I have one question. If the Justice Department is not doing anything, why don't we fire them and just quit paying them, or at least give them a sabbatical and quit paying them? I have never seen anybody so asleep at the wheel in my life.
If you're going to take this head on, how do you do that? Through litigation?
See you Wednesday. Now, last week, we had a little of this and a little of that. Last week, we took the FEC and the Federal Debate Commission head on. What could be more rotten than the two presidential candidates dictating who can be on a presidential debate. You have commissioners. They're supposed to be independent. If you follow that through, the FCC takes orders. The FEC takes orders. Even the judges would take orders in the federal court system because they got appointed. That must stop. These guys were stupid enough to go to the Kennedy School after the debate and boast about how they took me out of the debates. And they ain't going to like to live with that in court because, again, that's on tape. That's been printed in a book.
Speaker Gingrich just talked about campaign finance reform, and he said you should ask Ross Perot why is it fair that he can spend his fortunes on running for president when someone from the middle class can't afford to do that and has to live by $1,000 campaign contributions. How would you respond to that?
I don't want to spend a penny of my money. In the 1996 campaign, we were eligible for $30 million in funds. That's all we spent. Now then again, and this is a serious legal problem, we had to go against people who were getting more than twice that much from the FEC, and we had to fight the war when they were taking tens of millions of dollars of funds illegally and using them to promote their campaigns. That kind of stuff is criminal. Common Cause brought it to the table. We're going to get it on the table because when both parties are guilty, see, Washington is a sick place. Like the one campaign finance reform bill we have is being one of the sponsors was one of the Keating Five. This man would have been expelled from the Senate except for the fact that both parties were involved, so they swept it under the rug. Having people like this sponsor campaign reform would be like having Timothy McVeigh sponsor a bill to stop terrorism.
Will you?
And that bill is a sham. They blew it. They blew it. Big classic Washington, they should have let that one go through and declared, hallelujah, this is it, because it just takes a timid first step.
You just heard all four leaders of Congress, however, say there will be a debate and a vote certain next March, April on serious campaign finance reform. Will you get involved in that debate?
We won't have an opportunity to get involved in that debate. I made an offer last night on another debate. We're going to destroy the patent system this week if we're not careful. And this is driven by foreign money, and you know who got it. This is driven by big corporate money, so on and so forth. And we're going to destroy an inventor's rights. The press won't talk about it. The media won't report it. Only the New York Times wrote a tough editorial on it. And the American people are sick and tired of Congress taking money and the White House taking money and then paying everybody back. Now on Fast Track, they didn't talk about this. Fast Track was dead. Guess who brought it to life? 40 major corporate CEOs wrote a tough letter to the Congress and the White House, and in a nice way they were saying, guys, if you don't get this through, you're not going to get any money from us in the future.
But Mr. Perot, shouldn't the Reform Party be involved in campaign finance reform, lobbying Congress, in trying to convince Congress the way to go?
We would like to be, but keep in mind, all you hear on the television and on the newspapers is Perot keeps a low profile. No network would sell me time. I tried to get time and pay for it to discuss these issues with the American people on campaign finance reform.
Well, here you are this morning. You got your chance. What should Congress do? What should Congress do? What should Congress do?
Well, first, they should stop playing games. They should get, I think they're going to have an independent commission put it together for them, because, you know, this is like asking two guys in a casino to quit gambling. And they've all been in this system so long, it seems normal to them. I don't think there's a chance that we'll get good reform. I would like to be able in a logical way to explain this to the American people, but on the balanced budget, which was a total sham, and nobody would ever run the Congressional Budget Office chart that showed all of this balancing toward 2002 was going to take place anyway and would have taken place more quickly if they hadn't fooled with it. But after 2002, the debt takes off like a rocket. And nobody will even bring that to the attention of the American people. If I had a chance, I'd do it on television. We're going to get the story out. We're going to have to go in a different route. You're going to see a lot of the Reform Party from this point forward because we just can't sit here and take it any longer.
As you know, the Reform Party has splintered. A new group called the American Reform Party has broken off from your Reform Party. They say you have a very good message, but you're the wrong messenger. Will Ross Perot run for president in the year 2000 as the Reform Party candidate?
Tim, one more time, you know, if you tell a myth often enough, it becomes the truth. This group, you say there's a party's like 4 or 5 people, so let's get that straight. It's a nothing. But it gives the media all they want to just run a daily zinger. Because the establishment does not want a third party. Let's be candid. But the establishment is going to get a third party because the people are not served by the two parties. Whether I have to run for president or not will be determined in the future. I would prefer not to. I'd prefer not to be in public life. And the only reason I am doing this is because of my concern for the future of this country and for the country our children and grandchildren will live in. You take the president's own numbers. They forecast that the one-year increase in the deficit in the year 2030, this is the deficit in 1 year, is $4.1 trillion. We're going to have a system out of control in the 21st century if we don't fix it now, and if we don't go to the core of it, and that is campaign finance reform. We'll never get Washington back focused on the people instead of how do I get unlimited amounts of money.
But if the Reform Party came to you in 2000 and said, Ross, you're our best hope as the independent candidate, you would run, even though there is strong opposition from other former members of the Reform Party.
5 members.
Okay.
Could we just force ourselves to tell the American people the truth once? You go into that meeting I was in last night and you'll see a crowd. You go to one of their meetings and you'll think this guy's going to lunch. Now then, you give them the same credibility you give millions of people who created the Reform Party. No, that's not right, Tim.
No,
it's good politics, but it's wrong.
No, I'm not doing that. But we did take a survey with the Wall Street Journal, as you know, and asked people about you running for president. 29% of the people were wildly enthusiastic, but about 69% said they didn't want to vote for you for president. That's across the board of the American people. Is that, I mean, that is a statement people are making about you.
Well, so what? So what? This is not about me, and we're wasting time. I'd like to go back to work, selfishly. But I can't look at all these little children in this country, and the president on page 25 of his 1995 budget says that the next generation will pay an 82% tax rate. I care about that. Now, maybe I'm wrong, but I do care.
All right, Mr. Ross Perot, we thank you for joining us this morning. We hope you'll come back and join us in Washington, and we'll devote a whole show to the budget, the deficit, campaign finance reform, and more.
Okay, and I hope you'll ask Senator Dole why he interceded with the commissioners and kicked me out of the debates.
All right, Ross Perot, we thank you for that question, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Coming next, in his first extended television interview since last year's election, former Senator Bob Dole.
Son, agriculture sure has changed since your granddad taught me to farm. It's so high-tech these days, and precise.
Yeah, they call it precision farming. I bet you never thought we'd use satellites, computers, and electronic sensors to capture mapping information.
We've never had maps this accurate.
Some farmers today are using cutting-edge technologies that form a new process called precision farming, which gives the soil nourishment and fights pests precisely where needed. But that's only part of high-tech farming today. New no-till plowing methods are conserving precious topsoil. And thanks to biotechnology, better seeds help farmers produce more and better food.
You're right, Dad. Agriculture has become a high-tech industry.
Farmers are the most indispensable people on this planet. And the Archer Daniels Midland Company, one of the world's largest food processors, is an extension of today's high-tech farm.
Precision farming.
Precisely.
You haven't found one like it before, because we've never built one like it before. Introducing a new kind of LS400. You've never felt so connected to a car.
There are some people who don't need a refrigerator with sleek built-in styling or with an interior capacity unsurpassed in its class. But there's not a person on earth who can resist the GE Profile Performance Refrigerator because it's the only one with the water by Culligan filtration system. And everyone loves a glass of fresh, delicious, ice-cold water by Culligan. The GE Profile Performance, the only refrigerator with water by Culligan.
Senator Bob Dole, he's back after this station break.
The truth about the common cold. I try to take vitamin C. Does it help fight the nagging symptoms? Everything you need to know. The Cold War, Monday on NBC Nightly News.
Dateline Sunday, the British nanny sentenced to life for killing a baby. Now hear from the prosecution team who won the guilty verdict in their first primetime interview. Dateline tonight.
It's my fantasy makeover. Celebrity makeup secrets from the man behind those fabulous faces of Gwyneth Paltrow, Tina Turner. He's even working his movie star magic on our viewers. Next Oprah.
Monday at 4 o'clock on WBRE TV.
There is only one candidate for Superior Court who cares about our area, Judge Corey Stevens. Judge Corey Stevens, your friend, your neighbor. Judge Corey Stevens, the only candidate from northeastern Pennsylvania.
She grew up in an Irish family of 9 children. Joan Ori Melvin worked hard and today serves as an experienced judge. She started the first domestic violence court in Pennsylvania, a model for the nation. Judge Joan Ori Melvin, endorsed by police and her family.
Bill, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be here again.
Now, a year ago, you promised me that if you were elected president, we'd be having this interview in the Oval Office. What happened?
Well, I never quite made it. I mean, it looked good for a while, but I'm happy to be here. I've still got one chance to get there. But
you have one chance to get to the White House?
If Elizabeth runs.
What do you think?
Well, I don't know, but you know, I like to joke about it.
Would you encourage her? Give it a shot?
Well, she hasn't asked me, but I think she's certainly qualified. And if we're going to close the gender gap in the Republican Party, we ought to think about a woman on the ticket in the year 2000. But having said that, there are other qualified Republican women, too. So.
But she's a Harvard graduate.
Right.
She went to Oxford, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Transportation. She has all the qualifications, wouldn't you think?
I think so.
What about the baggage of the first husband?
Well, that would be a problem, but I told her all I want's a car and a driver if she gets elected, and a beeper. I want to, in case somebody leaves me behind, I want to be able to phone in.
Well, you would be first husband, right?
First husband. I'll be like Dennis Thatcher.
Well, not quite. Would you be in charge of movies and entertainment, you told New Yorker magazine?
Yeah, I think movies and entertainment, whatever, any of the heavy stuff.
But do you think if Elizabeth decided to run, she'd be a real serious candidate?
I think she'd be a very serious candidate, yes. Now, whether she runs or not, she hadn't discussed it with me. Right now, she's president of the American Red Cross and spending full time with that.
She'd be a natural for vice president on anyone's ticket.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen here. We have a number of good candidates out there, and I'm not one of them. But I'm still interested in the Republican Party. I hope we can elect a Republican president in the year 2000.
Thinking back on the '96 race, and now reading about all the campaign finance abuses and allegations, what are your thoughts?
I think I was a little naive. I mean, I didn't know you could direct and control your own advertising, and at least we were told you couldn't. But you know, there's some experts say that we may have lost the election in '95 even before we had a nominee in the Republican Party because they were so effective with their advertising, a lot of negative advertising called advocacy ads. But looking back on it, obviously winning's a lot more fun, but it was a great experience. Meant hundreds and thousands of good people. President Clinton won decisively. I have a good relationship, I think, with President Clinton. When I go to certain places around the world, I think there's a U.S. interest. I talk to the president beforehand, and I'm briefed by the Security Council, but I think I would have been a good president, but I never had the opportunity.
Do you think the Democrats won fair and square?
Well, I think perhaps the early advertising was important, and I think in our own, Speaker Gingrich touched on it earlier. Steve Forbes spent about $44 million in the primaries. The president didn't have any primary. He had Lyndon LaRouche. We had 8 or 10 candidates, and most of that $44 million was directed at me. So we were a little bit damaged going into the general election. And then, you know, it could have been age, might have been a factor, but I think overall they did a better job of knocking us down than we did.
When you look back at the '96 race, the Clinton administration spent $30 million in soft money on early television ads. But after you became the nominee, the Republican Party spent $9 million in soft money on Bob Dole, and also going after Bill Clinton a little bit.
I looked at one of the ads last night. It was sort of a, you know, a value ad. Never mentioned the White House. In fact, had my picture, so obviously I was the candidate. But that was 28th of May. Yeah. We'd already been subjected to about 6 months of heavy ads, so we did a little late. But I didn't direct or control that ad. I didn't have any input at all on that ad, which is a lot different than how
Well, the president did all these ads, according to Dick Morris and Bob Woodward of the Washington Post. He directed every single ad that was run by the Democratic National Committee.
But the Democrats would say that the ads for your campaign and for the Republican committee were all drafted by Don Sipple, the same ad agency that your fundraiser, Joanne Coe, raised money.
But not Bob Dole. In fact, we even fussed about some of the ads. And again, I don't want to get into it. The election's over.
Right.
And I haven't passed, you know, I'm going to file a statement with the Thompson Committee just because I left the Senate with my integrity intact, and I'd like to leave politics with my integrity intact. And I can't think of anything I did in the '96 election that would in any way violate the law.
Some of your handlers may have crossed the line and developed ads and paid for them, but you yourself are not aware of it?
Not aware of it. In fact, as I said, we used to fuss at some of the ads. We didn't think they were very good. But in any event, you know, I've got doing different things now, trying to raise $100 million for a World War II memorial, which I think is very fitting, and we're getting there. Fred Smith, the CEO of Federal Express, is my co-chairman. So we're going to raise that $100 million by, I hope, a year from now.
If you had a chance to go before the Thompson Committee hearings, what would you say? Or what would you say in your written statement?
Well, I would say pretty much what I said a moment ago, that I hope my integrity is still intact, that I did not violate any law that I know of. I didn't, you know, I think we did fundraising, obviously, but as far as the ads were concerned, I didn't direct or control the ads. That's a key element. And it's not as long as they're advocacy ads, there's no problem with soft money. It is legal. So that's pretty much. And I'd also talk about the FEC. I agree with Ross Perot on the FEC. I don't agree with much else he has to say. But there's a problem there because I'm the losing candidate. We've had as many as 25 to 40 auditors working ever since the last election. We still have some working. And if they impose a fine on our campaign and we don't have enough money to pay for it, then I've got to pay for it. There's something wrong with the system where the loser is sort of at the mercy of the Federal Elections Commission.
We did a poll last week, as I mentioned earlier, with the Wall Street Journal. You are now the most respected political figure in the country.
Is that right?
Yeah, your positive ratings are very, very high. Your negatives are extremely low.
Yeah.
People view you very much as, and this is not a pejorative term, as an elder statesman. Yeah. Looking back now, what would you advise Congress to do about this whole campaign finance mess as the American people begin to lose more and more interest in Washington and respect for Washington? Does Bob Dole have some advice as a warrior who's been through the battles?
Well, it takes too much of our time. You know, I thought, and again, I haven't focused on issues. I'm still, there should be maybe a cap on soft money and maybe phase it out 4 or 5 years. It'd make us work harder as candidates, make the parties work harder. But it's got to apply fairly to business and labor unions. It's got to be fair. If you're not a citizen, if you can't participate, if you can't vote, you shouldn't be able to contribute. That's tripped up both parties from time to time. And they ought to change the amount the individual can give. That has been changed since the 70s. If you just index it for inflation, that would help. I mean, these are basic things. Then I think we do need to take a look at the Federal Elections Commission. And I would certainly not suggest federal funding for congressional campaigns. I mean, if they know how much problem we're having with federal funding in presidential races, I don't think they'd want to impose it on Congress.
Ross Perot asked that I asked you about keeping him out of the debate. Why was it in your political strategy not to allow Ross Perot in the debate in 1996?
Well, we knew that the Clinton people were urging him to get in the debate. They didn't really want him in the debate either. Our view was he was not a serious candidate. And where do you draw the line? He did qualify for federal funds, and maybe he's got a new idea. If you qualify for funds, you ought to be in the debate. That's up to Congress, and maybe that's the way it should be. Would it have changed the outcome? Probably not, because the debates aren't that meaningful in any event. I mean, I made my statements, President Clinton made his statements. So our experts said that Perot should not be in the debate.
But you did seek his support in the closing days of the campaign.
Well, in fact, he almost joined up with us, and then he changed his mind within about 4 hours.
What happened? Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, he told me on the phone, I think we can work this out. We got to do it right. We got to be sure we do it right. And I called him back about 3 hours later. He had a totally different attitude. I mean, he changed his mind completely. It's not going to work, won't work. But, you know, I think he probably cost us one state, maybe a couple others. So it did make a difference because as we looked at it, about 7 out of 10 votes that Perot got would have gone to us. States like Kentucky and maybe 1 or 2 others could have made a difference.
Would it have changed the election?
No.
Not overall?
Not overall.
There had been some reports that you were unhappy with Jack Kemp as your running mate, that you would have preferred Connie Mack of Florida. Any truth to that?
No. I think at the time, Jack Kemp was perfect. I mean, everybody knew Jack Kemp. It sort of got down to Jack Kemp and Connie Mack Mack's a good friend of mine, an outstanding senator from a key state. No, I think I made the right choice. Jack, everybody knew Jack. He was a known quantity, and he worked as hard as I did. I remember about a year ago today, we were on the 96-hour marathon, and we kept it going for 96 hours, probably helped a little bit, maybe helped some congressional candidates.
What will you do in terms of the year 2000 if your wife doesn't run? Will you get involved on behalf of Kemp or another candidate?
Well, I'll be involved, hopefully. Hope they'll, and I'm involved now. I do, as I travel around, I do things for Republican Party and Republican candidates. You know, I'm very proud to be a Republican. I want to be in the majority party for the right reason, that we attract people to our party because we have an agenda, that we care about people, that we understand that people have problems. I think that's still a problem we have as a party. I think there's a feeling out there, particularly we found with single women who didn't really believe we cared about them. That wasn't my record, but that was sort of the message they received.
You came to Washington in 1961 as a congressman. What, in your mind, is your single greatest accomplishment?
Working with Pat Moynihan in 1983 to rescue Social Security. And again, it was totally bipartisan. We weren't the only two. There were other people involved, but we were sort of the key to getting it done. I think that, as I look back on it, there were 30-some million people depending on us, and we didn't let them down. Everybody's gotten their check on time since 1983. I think that's the most.
And now we're going to have to do that again, you think, in order to save?
Yes, I think so. And it's got to be done on a bipartisan basis. Same with Medicare. And I think a lot of talk about campaign finance reform may have to go back to do what Senator Mitchell and I tried to do. He appointed 3 people on the outside. I appointed 3 people, had no extra grind, no agenda. They weren't partisan. And they made recommendations to us. The problem is we didn't have any enforcing mechanism. And I believe to really get meaningful campaign finance reform, we may have to go outside Congress and let people make recommendations and then give Congress a vote up or down like we do on base closings.
What do you regret the most in your political history, your political life?
Regret? Well, I think from the personal standpoint, maybe losing in 1996, but I was not in Congress at the time.
But the fact that you'll never have a chance to be president is your biggest disappointment?
Well, I think it's a disappointment, but I haven't, I think about it from time to time, but I haven't let it consume me. I'm very active now doing other things and trying to make a difference, involved in a lot of issues that I think are important to the American people. And hopefully you can still make a difference. It would have been, you know, it was sort of a dream, I guess, from somebody in Russell, Kansas to be President of the United States, but probably a dream for somebody from Hope, Arkansas to be President of the United States, and he made it.
Do you believe your success in politics is an important symbol for disabled people across the country?
I think so. I mean, we do a lot of, still do a lot with the disability community, and in fact, I'll be in California tonight receiving an award from the Independent Living Group in California. It sends a strong signal, particularly to young people and the children, that you can have a disability, and you know, you still do about anything you want.
So, what are the odds that Bob Dole will be in the White House in the year 2000?
Well, I think I'll wait till after the 1998 elections. We have a number of outstanding governors: Governor Bush, Pataki, Engler, Thompson, Ridge, and most every, you know, all these guys held up their hands the last segment, except for Tom Daschle. I think he had a sore shoulder.
But your wife's better than all them.
Oh, well, obviously, but...
There you go. We finally got the endorsement she's been looking for. Senator Dole, you've been on this program 57 times. Joe DiMaggio hit in 56 consecutive games. That record will never be broken. My guess is your appearance today, number 57, will stay in the Meet the Press record books forever. We have a picture of all your previous appearances, I believe, if it's still available. We did have it. It's gone, all right. But Senator Dole, this is a book, 50 years of history in the making, Meet the Press, and we really want to thank you for all of your contributions to this program. You're always a good sport, always a very candid guest, and we thank you on behalf of all of us at Meet the Press for joining us this morning, and many, many more, and best of health for you, and best of success in all you do.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll be right back after this.
Meet the Press is sponsored by Canon. We have the systems that are the solution.
Somewhere. This plant uses that source to make enough vitamin E to meet the daily requirement.
Look at those sideburns in 72.
Oh, boy. I must have been mad in 90.
That was the old Bob Dole. Right. Senator Dole, thanks again. And coming up tonight on Dateline.
Thanks, Tim. It can start as a chip flaking off your car or truck and spread until much of the paint has peeled away. What's causing thousands of vehicles to shed? Could it happen to the model you drive? The story tonight at 7, 6 Central on Dateline. Tim?
Thank you, Stone Phillips. Check our Meet the Press website, 50th anniversary. Watch appearances by world leaders. Take our quiz. Send us a question. Find it all on msnbc.com. That's all for today. We'll be back next week celebrating our 50th anniversary. Our special guest, the President of the United States, Bill Clinton, here with us on Meet the Press. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Well, folks, Doug is the man. Doug.
6 different places gone. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday was just fantastic.
Joe Seidlich, Big Joe the Polka King, recalls the days when the polka really was king.
Roger, when I was growing up, Mom and Dad never thought about going to a dance without taking me along, and I learned how to dance before I was 5 years old. And all of the neighbor kids the same way. And what's polka music? Happiness. You never hear about anybody coming along and crying and weeping in a polka. Shucks, they're living it up. They're talking about the beautiful trees, the beautiful flowers, the gorgeous looking gal.
These days, all you can get on a rural American radio dial is self-pitying urban cowboys and cowgirls whining about their sorry lots, lost loves, and uncooperative dogs. It hasn't always been that way.
Oh, there's Al Grebnick's Laddie Polka. Hey, this is a gold mine. Not a lot of them, but boy, there's some good stuff here. And then there's the favorite of all time, of all of the Czech people. Červené víno, bílé koláče. That's the red wine polka. Fantastic sound. It was a gay old time, brings back precious memories.
Najíme se, napijem se, to se dobře skáče, červený víno.
Not all that long ago, small-town taverns and dance halls all across the plains had weekend polka dances. People laughing, whirling, romancing, instead of doing what's hot now, marching stolidly up and down the floor as if in close-order drill. Moreover, there were still joyful vestiges of the genuine history of this region to be heard on the radio. Every weekend you could find Big Joe and the lively lilt of the polka.
Eddie Zima and his orchestra. That's the Teresa's polka. I'd like to have $1 every time I played that.
In his heyday, Big Joe was heard across the nation. In some communities, he and polka music were Sunday radio.
Hey, hey, hey. How many times on a Sunday morning you heard me doing that, huh?
A lot of times, Joe.
From Omaha, Nebraska, going out to the entire packing house industry, we got the Polish Sausage 5½.
Tell us about your radio show, Joe.
I was on for 25 consecutive years on 3 different radio stations here in the state of Nebraska. The shortest show was 3½ hours. The longest one every week was here in Omaha, 9 hours every Sunday. So I had a lot of fun.
It was an energetic, lively beat reflecting the lively personality of the Eastern European settlers of this region.
Gangbusters, that's what it's all about. Happy music for happy people.
In fact, Big Joe attributes the demise of the music to the tendency to slow the tempo down.
And as a result of slowing it down, it no longer was this hop, jump atmosphere for the younger generation to get involved. It was, shucks, if we want to dance slow, let's go ahead and really snuggle up and do the modern stuff.
When was the last time you saw a dance at the Vochelka bar?
The last time I was at a dance here would have been 15 years ago, probably. There's still hopes up the street that the Sokol Auditorium, 13th and Martha, that's the place that used to be the biggie. Fantastic, this place. Just brings all kinds of memories. And bands, I mean, from all over the Midwest would want to play here at the Sokol Auditorium. It was famous.
It was the mecca for polka people.
Definitely, from Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, Colorado, Minnesota. You weren't a band until you played at the Sokol Auditorium. Shucks, even our great guy Lawrence Welk played here on several occasions.
I bet it was beautiful when the chandelier was on and all the other lights were off.
Yeah, it was down a little bit. You know, that way you could go ahead and squeeze your girl just a little bit closer. Each one of those little prisms could tell a story. Tell one story, they'd tell probably 500 different stories from what has all happened and transpired here.
It doesn't seem likely, despite the efforts of advocates like Big Joe, that the polka is on the verge of a comeback. But maybe a day will come when some youngsters make a startling discovery of a new dance, a new way to have fun, a way that's full of laughter and tradition. And on that day, I, for one, will be back on my feet, waiting for the music to begin. But it won't be at the Vochelka bar. Now this place will be a home for antiques, things of the past, like the polka.
People are saying they were a total failure because, again, with the Chinese, as Senator Thompson set out and said, he was going to prove that there was influence by the Chinese government, and he never did prove that, did he? But on the other hand, you know, I want to say that I give Thompson some credit here, because while I don't think he proved that, there was a picture presented to the American public that was quite astonishing, which is of our government for rent, if not for sale. And there are lots of great anecdotes. You know, Roger Tamraz, the oil man, saying he gave $300,000 to get in the front door at the White House. He wished he had given $600,000. Those Buddhist nuns testifying. Those are pictures the American public has, and I think there's a sense that the campaign finance system is broken and that, in fact, the politicians in Washington are now refusing to fix it.
Story that will, sorry,
Go ahead.
What does it mean? Does that mean Gore's in trouble? Does it mean Babbitt's in trouble? What will be the political fallout from this?
Well, I think so far there has not been any political fallout, but I think that reform and the question of special interest influence on our political system is going to be a big issue in Campaign 2000, even perhaps in the '98 elections. I do believe that those Republicans who say we shouldn't fix the system, it's not broken, may suffer a little bit in a general election campaign. It plays to the Republican base, but in terms of the general American public, it's not a real popular point of view.
I would say this on who's been helped and who's been hurt. I'm not sure that Senator Thompson has been helped all that much. On the other hand, I'm not sure he's been hurt. I'll tell you one person who I think has been hurt, and that is Interior Secretary Babbitt, who was brought before the committee and asked about this question of did he side with people who had contributed large sums of money to block this Indian casino being built out in Wisconsin. There was a real question, the committee raised a question as to whether, in fact, Babbitt had lied to the Congress about it. Now, do I think that Bruce Babbitt's going to be indicted? I don't know about that, but I'll tell you, he has always wanted to be on the Supreme Court, and my guess is he will not be on the Supreme Court now, and this is the reason why. Well, thanks to both of you. We're going to turn now to the real deal, where we highlight the little stories that help put the big stories in context, and Gloria Borger, as usual, has that story. Gloria?
Bob, call it the case of the doctored tapes. Remember those videos of White House coffees with the president? Altered. That's what Republican Dan Burton said on this show the other week, and he runs the House committee looking into campaign finance abuse. Some of those tapes may have been cut off intentionally, he told us, and then he added that the committee might hire a lip reader to figure out what the president was really saying to his supporters. Well, we're still waiting for those lip readers to report back, but we've checked these other hot tips, and we've come up empty-handed, as has just about everybody else. Senate hearings have produced no evidence of tampering. And Senate Republicans even hired Paul Ginsburg, a well-respected technical expert, to dissect those videotapes. Ginsburg spent weeks comparing the raw footage of the coffees to the composite greatest hits version handed over to the Congress. Committee sources say that Ginsburg will report next week there was no smoking gun, or altered tape for that matter. And Ginsburg tells us that the tapes were like watching the cocktail hour at a wedding. Not very illuminating, unless you're the bride. Or groom, Bob.
Okay. If you know the real deal about something, drop us a line here at CBS News, 2020 Elm Street in Washington. We'll check it out. I'll be back in a moment with a final word.
What time is it? It's time.
Sheer magic, isn't it? I hope this dangerous device will never be allowed into the hands of the people. Dangerous? Yes. If people once begin to know the time, they will no longer call you the king of time. They will want to know how time is spent. Oh, you're right. Oh, the people must never know. Oh, come. Oh, see, such workmanship. such precision. Such reliability. I do so prefer these things to my subjects. Watch, watch. See, no, that's the finest of them all. See? I have only to wind a key or press a spring, and they do exactly the same thing every time, and exactly what I want. And so often my subjects fail to do exactly what I want, and then I have to have their heads cut off. Oh! Collection is indeed magnificent, and so near completion, too. Near completion? I'd have you know my collection is the most complete completion. Please do not misunderstand me. I'm well aware that nothing short of a miracle could add luster to this already dazzling display. But such a miracle does exist. A mechanical toy better than any of mine? Knowing of your interest in these matters, I have brought it with me. Well, let's see it, quickly. Oh, I can't bear to be kept waiting. Exciting, this. If your Highness would wind it yourself. What's it going to do? Move its legs, or arch its neck, or wag its tail? It doesn't kick, does it?
Party for we the people, not them the special interests. They've already bought their two parties. Many people doubt that we can restore honesty and integrity to such a corrupt political system, but I don't care what they say, because each time we demand the truth, and each time we stand up for what's right, and each time we make a small sacrifice for our country, I know that we are making a difference. And I know that God is smiling down upon us. Harry S. Truman said that it's not the hand that writes the laws that holds the destiny of America. It's the hand that casts a ballot. We are the destiny of America, and I believe that we're up to the challenge. Thank you.
Delegates, there you have the four candidates for vice chairman of our National Reform Party: Peter Ashe, Dale Barlow, Pat Benjamin, Elizabeth Christman. Will the delegates cast their votes? Will the chairman of the delegations please bring those votes forward? trouble is when you've got noise going around here, you can't, it's not appropriate. Unless we give one speaker a couple more seconds. We all go, I thought the process would be set up. Oh, we're doing a roll call? Do I have? I thought the process was to bring the ballots forward. I was just corrected. The proper procedure, I am informed, is a roll call of the states. With that, we will commence a roll call of the states. Will our tellers make sure they're okay. Okay, here we go. And please, Chairman, approach a microphone. We have 2 live mics, one here and one there. Please, we are not going to take any time waiting for you to come up. Get in order, get in line. Be prepared to state the ballots of your state. Alabama.
Pat Benjamin, 5. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Pat Benjamin, 5. Dale Barlow, 3.
Pat Benjamin, 5. Dale Barlow, 3. Alaska. Arizona.
Arizona, Dale Barlow, 6. Pat Benjamin, 2.
Arkansas.
Dale Barlow, 3.
California. We will come back to California. Colorado.
7 for Pat.
Please step up to the microphone.
7 for Pat Benjamin, 1 for Elizabeth Christman.
Connecticut. Delaware.
Delaware's 1 vote for Dale Barlow.
District of Columbia.
District of Columbia is 4 votes for Pat Benjamin.
Florida, please keep your cheers down.
Florida, Barlow, 1. Benjamin, 15. Christman, 1.
Georgia.
Georgia, 5, Peter Ashe, 2, Elizabeth Christian, 2, Pat Benjamin.
Repeat, ma'am. We are.
Georgia. Oh, I did.
No.
5, Peter Ashe, 2, Elizabeth Christman, 2, Pat Benjamin, with a total of 9 votes.
Pat Benjamin had 9 votes, or the total was okay. Hawaii. Idaho.
Idaho casts 1 vote for Dale Barlow.
Illinois. Indiana.
Indiana, Ashe, 1. Barlow, 5. Christman, 4.
Iowa.
Iowa, Dale Barlow for 6, and Elizabeth Christian for 2.
Kansas.
Kansas casts 2 votes for Elizabeth Crispin and 5 votes for
Dale Barlow.
Kentucky.
Kentucky votes 1 vote for Dale Barlow, 1 vote for Pat Benjamin, and 6 votes for Elizabeth Crispin.
Louisiana.
2 votes for Dale Barlow, 4 for Elizabeth Crispin.
Maine.
1 vote Dale Barlow, 2 for Crispin.
1 vote for Barlow, 2 for Crispin. Maryland. Maryland.
5 votes Pat Benjamin, 3 votes Dale Barlow.
Massachusetts.
Pat Benjamin 4, Dale Barlow 2, Peter Ashe 1.
Michigan.
Michigan votes 5 votes for Elizabeth Crispin of Pennsylvania and 7 votes for Dale Welch Barlow of Oklahoma.
Would Massachusetts please repeat their vote?
Pat Benjamin 4, Dale Barlow 2, Peter Ashe 1.
Would Michigan please repeat their vote?
Michigan 5 for Crispin, 7 for Barlow.
Minnesota.
You betcha. Minnesota. Peter Ashley, 3. Dale Barlow, 5. Pat Benjamin, 3.
Mississippi.
Mississippi, 2 for Dale Barlow, 1 for Elizabeth Crispin, 1 for Pat Benjamin.
The chair people, would you please, when you make your votes, would you do it in the order of the 4 people who spoke? Our tellers are having trouble skipping around their pages. Would Michigan please restate their vote? And
Again, Michigan votes 7 for Barlow, 5 for Crispin.
And you have Mississippi? Okay. Missouri.
For Missouri.
Hold it. Would Mississippi please, one more time? And again, try to do it in the order of the 4 people that were on the ballots.
Mississippi, 2 for Barlow, 1 for Pat Benjamin, 1 for Elizabeth Crispin.
We're up to date? Missouri.
For Missouri, Dale Barlow, 1 vote. Pat Benjamin, 5 votes. Elizabeth Crispin, 1 vote.
Montana.
Montana, Dale Barlow, 1 vote.
Nebraska.
The great state of Nebraska, the nation's breadbasket, is proud to cast all 3 votes for Dale Barlow.
Nevada. New Hampshire.
New Hampshire, Dale Barlow, 1. Pat Benjamin, 2. Elizabeth Crispin, 1.
New Jersey.
New Jersey proudly votes